It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. European leaders prepare £80 billion of tariffs in retaliation for Donald Trump's Greenland threat, but say they want to try diplomacy first.
The Prime Minister spoke directly to Donald Trump on the phone and told him he was wrong.
Also ahead, another Conservative MP, Andrew Rossendale, defects to reform. He's the third senior Tory to desert the party this week. At least 10 people have died in a high-speed train crash in Spain, with 100 injured. Prince Harry versus the Daily Mail. We look ahead to the high-stakes trial that has already fractured relations within the royal family. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. European leaders are preparing £80 billion worth of tariffs that could be imposed on America in retaliation for Donald Trump's threats over Greenland. But they say they want to try diplomacy first. An emergency EU summit is due to take place in the coming days to discuss what happens next. Here in London, we expect to hear more from the Prime Minister tomorrow. He's spoken directly to President Trump on the phone. Our political correspondent, Amanda Acas, reports.
2,000 miles from London, the future of Greenland risks tearing apart the so-called special relationship and the whole Transatlantic alliance. For now, Sir Keir Starmer and his European allies are standing firm against Donald Trump's threats to slap further tariffs on their goods unless he's able to buy the Danish territory.
Our position on Greenland is non-negotiable. We've made that very clear. This decision on tariffs is completely wrong. The future of Greenland is for the people of Greenland and the people of the Kingdom of Denmark to determine, and for them alone.
It's a position supported by the government's usual opponents.
The message is loud and clear. NATO is stronger when we stand together and speak with one voice against our adversaries in the world. And the point being about tariffs, we do not support tariffs, and we must not have further tariffs being applied to the United Kingdom.
It's reported the EU could retaliate with £80 billion worth of tariffs, but they'd much rather do a deal. All 8 affected countries have issued a joint statement to insist they stand united, reiterating their solidarity with Denmark and Greenland and arguing that tariff threats risk a dangerous downward spiral. But the White House seems in no mood to negotiate.
Better now, peace through strength, make it part of the United States, and there will not be a conflict, because the United States right now, we are the hottest country in the world. We are the strongest country in the world. The Europeans project weakness. The U.S. projects strength.
Donald Trump's threats clearly came as a shock here in Downing Street. Sir Keir Starmer has invested a lot of time and energy cultivating a close connection with him to strengthen the special relationship. Now the American president's trampled all over that. The question is how to respond. While the government wants to sound tough and don't want to be provocative, Lee Sinandi was reluctant to discuss the possibility of retaliating with tariffs of our own or potentially cancelling the King's state visit, as the Liberal Democrats are demanding.
Sir Keir Starmer has now spoken to President Trump after a flurry of diplomatic calls with the leaders of Denmark, NATO and the European Commission. We're told he informed the US president he's wrong to apply tariffs to his allies. The transatlantic divide has rarely seemed so deep. Amanda Acas, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, we'll get more from Amanda in Downing Street in just a moment. But first, let's speak to Mark Stone in Washington, D.C. for us. And Mark, how serious is Donald Trump?
Look, I think he's absolutely serious about his desire for Greenland to be part of the United States. There's a question over how serious he is about actually imposing these tariffs, because that would, as Amanda has just been describing, create a spiral effect, I think, where reciprocal tariffs would come into effect. And then where would that lead? Look, I think, honestly, this has been a bewildering weekend for pretty much the whole of Europe, in capitals across Europe. They did not expect that this Greenland issue would spiral in quite the way it has. I was at the Danish embassy here in Washington on Friday, where the ambassador and others were briefing us about how they think their meeting, their foreign minister's meeting with Trump's team earlier last week, how that went. And while they didn't think it went particularly well, in that there was no breakthrough to find a compromise or some way to placate Donald Trump for his desire to own Greenland, they also didn't expect, there was no sense that they expected it to spiral in the way that it has over the course of the weekend. Look, I think two things are at play here. In the immediate term, I think right now the European nations who are threatened with these tariffs want to find a way to find some common ground, or at least kick the can down the road a bit, to allow some time. February the 1st, when these tariffs are due to come into effect, is not very far away. Allow for some time to try and find a middle ground on the issue of Greenland. The Danes are quite clear, and have been clear to me here in the United States, that they are open to talk about anything except sovereignty. Greenland will always be part of Denmark, they say, and the self-determination of Greenland is up to the people of Greenland. That aside, the Danes are willing to discuss absolutely anything. The problem is that it appears from certainly American sources I've been talking to, but clearly the people that the Danes are talking to as well, that Donald Trump doesn't really care about any of that. He's not looking for middle ground. He's looking to take ownership of Greenland. And in that context, it's very hard to see where compromise can be found.
OK, Mark, thank you very much for the moment. Amanda, to you next. And we know that Sir Keir Starmer has actually spoken to Donald Trump, and they'll be working hard behind the scenes in Downing Street, where you are.
Well, yes, and I think there will be a real sense of relief in Downing Street that call has actually happened following a real rush of diplomatic activity, those calls with other European leaders, because the UK wasn't involved in that emergency meeting of EU ambassadors in Brussels today, because, of course, we're not part of the EU, and therefore we can't be part of that kind of blanket possible threat to look at issuing £80 billion worth of tariffs to US goods that the EU has currently on the table. Now, instead, the position of the UK has been to talk about negotiating, to try and emphasise the fact that Sir Keir Starmer does have this good relationship with Donald Trump. Now, clearly, that hasn't played out as they would have hoped over the past few days, and it seems the UK, as with the other Europeans, had no prior warning of what Donald Trump was about to announce yesterday evening. But I think they're still hoping that they might be able to use that relationship to try and come to some kind of negotiated agreement about this. And certainly the very brief readout we had of that call emphasises not just the fact that Sir Keir Starmer told the President that he believed he was wrong about these tariffs and also supported the sovereignty of Greenland, but also talked about what the UK has been doing to work to protect and improve security in the High North, in the Arctic, which of course is where this kind of deployment, this very small deployment, one UK military officer only and a small number of other soldiers from other countries within this group was sent as part of this training exercise reconnaissance mission, which seems to have so antagonised President Trump. And I think what Sir Keir Starmer's message has been, we've listened to you, we know you want more security in the High North, and that's what we're trying to deliver. Now, it's still very unclear as to whether that is a message Donald Trump wants to hear. That for now, Sir Keir Starmer's policy, as before, is to attempt to try and bring President Trump back on side while also talking tough.
And Amanda, more breaking news domestically this evening. Another Conservative MP has defected to Reform.
Yes, indeed. Andrew Rosendale, following hot on the heels of Robert Jenrick, who, of course, is rather more high-profile member of the Conservative Party as a member of the Shadow Cabinet. Andrew Rosendale was the MP for Romford, but he was a junior Shadow Minister, as it were, for Foreign Affairs. And I think this will be a real shock for many in the Tory party, particularly as he reiterated some of the messages that we heard from Robert Jenrick as to why he was making that move last week, saying the party is irrevocably bound to the mistakes of previous governments and unable to take meaningful accountability for their poor decisions, and saying that's why he felt he had no choice but to move to Reform. In particular, he highlighted the decision about the Chagos Islands to hand sovereignty to Mauritius while paying to lease the airbase that is jointly run by the UK and the US at Diego Garcia, not taking into account, he says, the views of the Chagosians. Now, clearly, this is another real blow to Kemi Badenoch. At the end of last week, she was saying she was confident her team were united. She said she didn't believe any of the Shadow Cabinet would be defecting. She said she was 100% confident about that. But this will still come as a real blow. Now, the Tory party say, well, is good riddance effectively. She's had Nigel Farage to do her spring cleaning for her. He's been talking about defecting for some time now. He's always denied it, but we knew what was coming. But clearly the other political parties have responded fairly gleefully tonight. Labour saying the stench of the dying Tory party now engulfs reform. However, it's interesting that we've had this announcement on a Sunday night without much fanfare, without the kind of press conference that we've seen from these previous defections. We know that Nigel Farage has talked about a Labour figure defecting next week, due to be unveiled. So potentially, what could we see there? We don't know, although it's interesting that the Labour peer, Kate Hoey, former MP of course, posted online that Andrew Rosendale was simply the best defection ever. So certainly food for thought across Westminster this evening.
Indeed. Amanda, thank you. And we'll take you through some of the stories on all the front pages in our press preview tonight at 10:30, including the one we've just been discussing on the front page of the Financial Times. The country's top police officer, Sir Mark Rowley, says there's a need for root and branch reform of the police system in England and Wales. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner said that the current policing model, designed more than 60 years ago, is out of date for the challenges faced today. There are 43 police forces in England and Wales. Shingi Marike reports now from Yorkshire.
This is Pontefract in West Yorkshire, a small market town sat between 3 of the 4 police forces in England's largest county. Under proposed police reforms, that map could be redrawn, with county-based forces turned into regional ones. Changes to the national picture that locals here had strong feelings about.
Shocked, really, because we haven't got enough police to start with, have we? So, quite shocked.
It's what we want, stronger police force, cut the crime down.
Local police for local people.
Exactly.
Keep it in our own, in our own towns, cities, whatever.
Britain's most senior police officer is calling for these sweeping changes.
The current policing model is a tweaked and bastardised version of what was designed in a 1962 Royal Commission. It is so out of date for the challenges today. If you've got a overly bureaucratic, complicated, convoluted, sort of spaghetti system, all of that complexity sucks resources away from the locals.
In the system he's referring to, there are currently 43 police forces across England and Wales. The Home Secretary is considering reducing that number to as few as 12, in what would be the biggest piece of policing reform for more than 6 decades. York and North Yorkshire's Deputy Mayor has policing in her portfolio. She's not entirely in favour of the plans.
The Mayor, David Skaith, and I are determined to make sure that our rural communities are supported. The police are prioritising tackling rural crime as well as neighbourhood policing in all of our communities. But actually, if we were part of a bigger, Greater Yorkshire force, that would mean that potentially the resource would get pulled into the much bigger metropolitan areas of the region. It also just has to work for every community, and my worry is that it just wouldn't.
The idea behind reducing the number of forces would be to make law enforcement more efficient and cost-effective. But in places like Yorkshire, that could potentially mean merging forces made up of multiple towns, cities and villages, each with their own unique set of challenges and issues. But the government says reform is about the bigger picture and investing in new ways to fight modern crime. For communities across the country, that could mean changes to policing not seen in a generation. Shingi Marike, Sky News.
It's being reported tonight that at least 10 people have been killed after a high-speed train derailed and collided into another in southern Spain. Amelia Harper's been following this story. What more do we know?
Well, this, as you can understand, is a rapidly unfolding situation, but we know that at least 10 people have died after a train derailed in southern Spain. Emergency services in Andalusia are on the scene, and we can see immediately those pictures. We can see a carriage that looks to be at about 45 degrees at an angle, and there's someone in the foreground being carried off. We know that 2 high-speed trains have collided. One of them derailed, ending up on the track of an oncoming train. So we know that the train that derailed was the evening train between Malaga and Madrid. It then hit a train coming in the opposite direction from Madrid to Huelva, which is another southern Spanish city. And the train that derailed had 317 people on board, and this happened at 7:40 p.m. local time. And interestingly, it was the back carriage of this first derailed train that came off the track. And then it was that back carriage that was then hit by the oncoming train. And as we can see in those images, emergency service workers are there in numbers on the scene, and they are focused at the moment on that back carriage. We understand that many people were able to walk off this train by themselves. We just saw there one person coming out of the window. But we do know that a number of the windows have been shattered as a result of this derailment, causing people injuries. At the moment, we don't yet know what caused the back carriage of this first train to derail, which then had that oncoming train hit it. Emergency workers will, of course, be trying to ascertain that at the moment. They've set up an emergency medical facility in the area to try to triage patients that are coming into them. All high-speed trains between Madrid and Andalusia on Spain's southern coast have been suspended, and there's been reaction from the transport minister saying it's a very serious situation. They're monitoring things, and we've heard from the Spanish royal family. They've issued a statement to say they are following the situation, and they extend their condolences to the families and the loved ones of those who've died.
OK, Amelia, thank you very much for that update. Doctors have warned the use of mobile phones amongst children has become a public health emergency. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges has written to ministers saying screen time and harmful online content are having dangerous effects on children's well-being. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi reports.
A public health emergency damaging our children's mental and physical health. That's the warning about social media from the country's leading medical royal colleges.
Pornography is so rife.
Dr. Rowena Christmas is a GP in Wales and says she sees the evidence in her surgery all too often.
Every single day they're seeing problems that children are coming into them with, whether it's their mental health, whether it's anxiety, difficulty focusing in schools, or physical health. You know, they're not getting outside and playing in the same way.
The Royal College of GPs is one of 20 signatories to a letter sent to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, and the Science and Technology Secretary, Liz Kendall, explaining why social media restrictions for under-16s are needed. They warn of the accumulating evidence of health harms from tech and devices being witnessed by frontline clinicians, who gave personal testimony about the horrific cases they've treated in primary, secondary, and community settings. But some children's and online safety organisations do not support a blanket ban. They want to see a more targeted approach.
A ban is the wrong idea. It carries a range of unintended consequences. And I think we're really concerned that parents and parliamentarians are being presented with a false binary right now. The idea that either we proceed with an outright ban or we continue with the appalling status quo in which children are coming to harm.
This reform will change lives.
Last December, Australia became the first country in the world to ban social media for its under-16s. It's too early to see what effect that ban has had, but it has divided opinion in the country, as it does over here.
I am a parent of a girl who's 10, should definitely be banned. There's no need for it.
I'm not sure about a full ban, but certainly restricted. I've literally myself just come off of Instagram because you find yourself just addicted to it.
I personally would favour education rather than banning. I think banning something just makes it more desirable.
Other countries are expected to follow Australia's lead, and the government is to launch its consultation next week to gather more evidence before deciding what action it should take. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
The government is pulling an amendment to its proposed Hillsborough law because of concerns from campaigners that it would be an obstacle to the main aim of the bill, which is to force public officials and contractors to tell the truth after disasters. The bill follows years of campaigning by families involved in the 1989 Hillsborough disaster, in which 97 people died. Afterwards, the police were accused of lying about what happened and trying to shift the blame for the disaster onto Liverpool fans. 8 people have been killed in a series of avalanches in Austria. 3 Czech skiers were killed in the Pusterwald region yesterday afternoon, and a number of skiers were caught up in that avalanche in central Austria. At least 18 people have died and hundreds of homes destroyed in forest fires in Chile, where the country's president has declared a state of catastrophe. Firefighters are currently battling 24 fires and more than 50,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. It will be a big day for celebrity spotting at the High Court in London tomorrow, with a case brought by Prince Harry and several other famous faces due to get underway. The Duke of Sussex, along with Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley, claim their privacy was breached by the publisher of the Daily Mail Associated Newspapers. With a background to the trial, here's our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, and our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock.
Prince Harry versus the tabloid press, round 3. This time, he's taking on the Mail.
Attempting to expose the dark arts of journalism with 6 other prominent figures.
They're claiming journalists used unlawful information gathering dating back 30 years. So who's involved?
And what do you need to know?
It's all happening at the High Court, and this is a location Prince Harry is rather familiar with because he's been here before. In 2023, he took on Mirror Group newspapers, making him the first senior royal to give evidence in a courtroom since the 19th century. Now his fight with Fleet Street turns to the Daily Mail.
In the late 80s, the Daily Mail shifted its main offices from Fleet Street to this building in Kensington. And this case calls into question what journalists were doing here as far back as the 90s. And it's not just Harry. The claim has been brought by Sir Elton John and his husband David Furnish. Actors Liz Hurley and Sadie Frost are also a part of this, as is Baroness Doreen Lawrence, whose son Stephen Lawrence was murdered, and former Liberal Democrat politician Sir Simon Hughes. The 6 are accusing the publisher of breaches of privacy, including hiring private investigators to secretly place listening devices inside cars and homes and paying police officials for inside information. It's also alleged individuals were impersonated to obtain medical information from private hospitals and access their bank accounts.
Associated Newspapers, or ANL as they're known for short, also publish the Mail on Sunday and Mail Online. They strongly deny all the allegations, calling them preposterous smears. The case has been going on since 2022. ANL had asked for it to be struck out, arguing the legal challenges were brought far too late. But in November 2023, the judge, Mr. Justice Nicklin, gave the go-ahead for a trial.
What's happened since? Well, earlier this year, lawyers for the claimants sought to amend their case to add a swathe of new allegations for the trial. They argued that they should be allowed to rely on evidence that they claim showed the Mail was involved in targeting Kate, the Princess of Wales. However, the judge ruled this allegation was brought too late before the trial.
Crucially, the High Court heard a key witness in the case, the private investigator Gavin Burrows, claimed his signature on a statement confirming alleged hacking had taken place was forged. That's important because most of the claimants told the court they started legal action based on evidence apparently obtained by Mr. Burrows. What'll be interesting is whether he's still called as a witness.
A judge previously said if Burrows gave evidence that was inconsistent with the evidence they had obtained, then they could apply to treat him as hostile.
But could the 9-week trial end before it even gets going? Well, in short, yes, civil cases can be settled. This happened in Harry's case against News Group newspapers, NGN, which published The Sun. Just before the trial began last year, it was announced both sides had reached an agreement. NGN apologised to Harry and paid substantial damages, reportedly more than £10 million, mostly in legal fees.
One thing's for certain, there is a lot the claimants want to get off their chest.
And for Prince Harry, this is the last chapter of his highly personal crusade against the tabloid press.
Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock and our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spence are both reporting there. Let's get the latest sports news for you now with David.
Well, Evertonians are getting restless. Their team can't score goals and they need a win. The prospect of another long struggle against relegation is already looming. And Ruud Gullit isn't happy at the way things are mapping out at Newcastle either. They're just as desperate for points. So a real crunch match this.
There was some whisperings in the press, but there was no indication whatsoever of the imminent nature of what was going to happen that night.
It happened very quickly. I think I only got told maybe a couple of days leading up to the Newcastle game that the agent was phoning me saying that the club were looking to sell you. Yeah, it came out the blue really. Something I wasn't looking to do. I wasn't looking to move. I didn't want to move for the club.
We were under pressure from the bank to get the overdraft down. We were playing Newcastle and the chairman and joint owner were there and I wasn't there, I wasn't privy. It was news to me when it came through. Newcastle had come in with an £8 million offer. And Peter accepted it.
There were murmurs as the night progressed, and then it sort of reached the crescendo around the half an hour of the game mark, and I was getting bombarded by the press. You know, Duncan's going to Newcastle, Duncan's going to Newcastle. There was a group of fans appeared outside the stadium at the reception door.
A lot of us were in Spain covering Celta Vigo for Liverpool, which was taking place on the Tuesday. The Everton-Newcastle game was the Monday night. We started getting message that Duncan Ferguson was leaving.
I saw Michael Dunford, who was the Everton secretary at the time, you know, and in those days the secretary did all the signings and the transfers. And so I said to him, Michael, the press are going mad. They're saying Duncan Ferguson is leaving. And he said, rubbish. So I said, really? So he says, rubbish. So I said, okay. So off I went upstairs to the press room and I proclaimed in front of 40, 50 press guys, absolute rubbish.
Well, I'm sure they would have loved to have had him out there, Duncan Ferguson, because he's their leading scorer this season with 5 goals.
I was actually in one of these boxes here. I think it was in one next door. I got called up to speak to them after the game. That was the first meeting I'd had with them.
I walked back down the stairs and halfway down the stairs on one of the floors there by one of the lounges, there's a little chairman's office which he just uses on match days, and the door was ajar slightly, and I thought that shouldn't be like that on a match day, you know, because obviously any fans could walk into it. So I thought I'll just close the door up, just put my head round, see if there's anyone in there. So I put my head round the door and there's Ruud Gullit, Duncan Ferguson and his agent, and they're signing the contract.
It got explained to me really in the end that the club was struggling for a wee bit of money. I was the asset and they wanted to sell. That was the story I got told anyway. They got the £8 million for me.
You've got to remember also, Duncan had gone through a lot of the time with this hernia injury that was recurring all the time, and he didn't play anywhere near the number of games you would expect for your lead striker. You can understand Peter's thinking behind it.
It's the final whistle and it's relief all round at Goodison Park.
Very frustrated because you sit down on the bench and you think like, nah, we're never going to score a goal, never. We need some power up front, we know that. We hope that it's going to happen very quickly.
He was a better player than most people thought he was. Of course he was tough, but that is what I needed up front. I needed to have somebody who could hold the ball, keep the ball, and also animated the team. So therefore I needed Duncan.
Next minute, Duncan came down with his agent. They came out the door and there was a car waiting for him across the road.
Dunk's father was in the Winslow across the road, and apparently he walked in there and said, they've sold my son to Newcastle, and all hell was let loose.
He got in this car and off he went, and there were people jumping on the back of the car. There were people screaming, don't go, Duncan. You know, it was crazy. I followed the chairman into his Rolls Royce up to Oxton where he lived at the time, and he looked at me and he said, what do you think? I said, well, this is bad, Chairman. You know, fans are going crazy, you know, it's not good. And he looked at me and he put his hands to his mouth and he said, I don't care, I'll be in Jersey in an hour. And that was the last we saw of Peter Johnson.
It's the story which has gripped Merseyside. Walter Smith's future on the line. The Everton boss apparently close to quitting over the multi-million-pound sale of captain Duncan Ferguson to Newcastle.
Well, I think any manager would have to consider his position after that's happened. But there was a board meeting this morning and quite a few things were cleared up, so I'm still Everton manager and will remain Everton manager. In fairness, we have spent a fair amount of money, and that was one of the reasons that I had to take into account. And we spent a fair amount of money, and I don't think it was right for me to turn my back in that situation.
I think Walter knew little about it, if any. He was in the dark as well.
Was he against you going, Walter?
I think he was, yeah, to begin with, yeah. But a few conversations, as you can imagine.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. When we come back, I'll be joined by Associate Editor and columnist at the Financial Times, Stephen Bush, and broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of The Guardian. Their headline, EU weighs up €93 billion retaliation for Trump's Greenland blackmail. We'll be right back.